morning and welcome to Sea Airspace 2023 and the F-35, the future of the global joint aviation platforms discussion this morning. My name is Rear Admiral Greg Harris. I go by Hi-Fi. I'm joined up here today by Lieutenant General Michael Cederholm from the U.S. Marine Corps, who's the Deputy Commandant for Aviation. Lieutenant General Michael Schmidt from the U.S. Air Force, who's the PEO at the F-35 Lightning II Program Office. We've got Air Commodore Angus Porter, who's the Commodore from the Royal Australian Air Force and the Air Attaché and Space Attaché from the Royal Australian Air Force, and Miss Bridget Lauderdale, who's our Vice President and General Manager of the F-35 II Lightning Program at Lockheed Martin. So without further ado, I'm going to ask my panelists in order to just give a quick introduction to yourself, and then we'll dive into questions.
Well, thanks. Lieutenant General Mike Cederholm, call sign Homie, F-18 pilot by background. I've had the opportunity to fly the F-35, and I have the humble privilege of being the 43rd Deputy Commandant for Aviation, sir.
Welcome.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm Lieutenant General Mike Schmidt, F-35 PEO. I think I'm the number 13 PEO, F-35 PEO. This is my fifth opportunity to serve as a PEO. I guess I'm going to keep doing it until I get it right. But it is a great opportunity. Absolutely incredible job, and I look forward to talking here today. Hi-Fi, thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you.
Air Commodore Angus Porter. I'm the Air and Space Attaché at the Australian Embassy here in Washington, DC. I've just come from Australia. My previous posting was command in the E-7 Wedgetail wing back in Williamtown in Australia. So I'll get it out of there right now. I am not a JSF pilot, but I'll do my best to answer the questions on behalf of the Australian Air Force.
Awesome, thank you.
Hi, I'm Bridget Lauderdale and lead the F-35 program for Lockheed Martin. I'm an engineer by education and training, and I think I've had most of the jobs at aeronautics, certainly in the fighter platform as well as in our operations, engineering, supply chain, et cetera. I feel absolutely privileged to be here with all of you today and excited to be leading the program for Lockheed and frankly taking the opportunity this week to listen and to hear from you all what's on your mind, how things are going, and then take very seriously our responsibility to deliver you warfighting capabilities.
Thank you, Bridget. So to kind of give us a leveling piece, I asked General Schmidt if he could talk to us a little bit about the PEO and the JSF program is right now. You took over your current role a little over a year ago, if I'm not mistaken, maybe a year and a half. And just like to kind of get a bit of a leveling for the audience on where the JPO is and where the F-35 program is.
All right, thanks, Hi-Fi. It might seem like that to you, but it's been about 8 months since I took over. Actually, I could probably talk. I don't want to eat up the whole hour here in talking about the program. It is a vast program. I just hit a few highlights. So it is absolutely incredible to me to see these airplanes all around the world. We've delivered over 900 aircraft, over 1,000 engines, over 1,000 mid-fuselages, over 625,000 hours flown, actually more like 635 right now. That is absolutely incredible. I've had a chance to get to a few places around the country and around the world, to include on the Carl Vinson 2 weeks ago, which was absolutely spectacular, seeing F-18s and F-35s launch and recover on the Carl Vinson. Wherever I've gone, every one of the conversations I've had with the pilots has been how well this airplane performs, how well it senses, how well it communicates, and the maintainers find this airplane easy to maintain when critical parts are available. And I'll talk a little bit about the sustainment side of that in just a second. On the production side, you know, we just awarded a contract with Lockheed and Pratt for over 400 or almost 400 aircraft over the next 3 years. That is absolutely incredible. We'll kind of max out in Lot 17, so that's kind of the FY 25 calendar year 25 delivery time frame. 156 airplanes a year. The international aspect of this program is absolutely incredible. This program is unlike any other program, and we have 7 international partners. We also have 9 foreign military sales customers and growing, but we have 7 partners that we started off in this program. They have invested in development of this program along with the United States. They together pay about 20% of all the development costs in this program and they get a vote, which is different than any of our other programs. Twice a year, we have this thing called the Joint Strike Fighter Executive Steering Board, where we come together and set the priorities in the program. And the United States has one vote. And that is just a very, very interesting process to me. It's absolutely incredible kind of diplomacy as we work through hard issues and priorities. On the sustainment side, it is absolutely an enormous sustainment network that we are growing to get after having all of those airplanes in all of those places around the world. We're operating from 27 bases and 10 ships today and growing really quickly, actually. But the sustainment side of that requires a significant depot presence both in the United States and in our partner countries all over the world and some of our FMS countries. So on that part of it, you know, I think we're a little bit late in standing up some of our depots to deal with the capacity that we need to get to. But I would say in this Lot 15 to 17 negotiation, we actually held back on the urge to buy aircraft with depot stand-up money and held our own to keep that money available to stand-up depots. That's a huge win. I think once we can really figure out this global sustainment enterprise to make sure that we can meet all the demands of all the countries, every single day. Not that we're not doing it today. There's a team of people that's centrally located in Ohio that moves these parts all around the world every single day. It's absolutely incredible. That team is made up of Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, international partners, and it is quite an enterprise. But getting that right is a huge focus area of mine, and I'm happy to talk about it here later today. I don't know if one hit anything else there, I-5, but those are just
That's a great start.
Okay.
Thanks, General. Appreciate it. So I guess I'll kick off. We'll kind of follow that theme on readiness and logistics. As the program matures, production rates start to settle in a little bit, and the initial operational test and evaluation efforts are starting to conclude. It appears that the program, to your point, needs to position itself to sustain those aircraft affordably and effectively for the decades to come. Can our panelists, and looking particularly to you and to Bridget, give us some insight on what efforts are underway to try to reduce those operation and sustainment costs while increasing that mission readiness across the force?
I can start out here, hi-fi. So, one thing that I've instituted last fall was what we're calling a war on readiness, and it's really broken down into 4 areas: the top degraders, so the top components in the airplane where we're not meeting the demands in the field, are non-mission capable for supply and everything that goes into that, whether it's transportation, getting parts back, having the right throughput and velocity at our various product support providers, and then non-mission capable for maintenance. So what can we do to make the maintainers all they can be, and then long-term down aircraft. It is easy to, when someone has a hard landing or something like that, to let that ride on a different timeline and getting that airplane back to where it needs to be. And you can, if you do that for a few airplanes, you get into that mindset that I don't have to get after that long-term down airplane. You can really mess up the entire sustainment network. So we're focused in all those areas. We have successes across the board. If you think about top degraders, and I'm not going to talk about each of them, but many of you are aware that the power modules would have been last year's top degrader. I'm really proud of the team at Tinker, in the JPO, at Pratt & Whitney, for turning that 100% around. We went from 48 tails with holes in them a little over a year ago to 1 last month. And so that's when we say top degraders. If we could just knock off those top degraders, that's a huge difference to our mission capability rates. We've also, on the engine side as well, pushed out blending limits and inspection on the engine that the maintainers didn't have those opportunities before. We would previously pull an engine when today you wouldn't necessarily have to with the additional tech data that we pushed out to the field. We're seeing over a 50% increase in reliability in terms of engine on wing time, and that's kind of new stuff that I'm anxious to see how that really plays out over the life of the program. So anyways, those are the focus areas that we're really trying to get after, and can talk in more detail on any of them if you'd like, but Bridget?
Sure, thanks, General Schmidt. And, first I would say we have really appreciated your leadership and focus on, hey, we've got these challenges out there. Is the entire whole of the enterprise coming together and contributing in a way that moves us faster to those solutions? It wasn't that many years ago, I would say wingtip lenses were on the top of that top degrader list, and together, as we work design and how quickly can we move material into the field, we see those things clear. We have a handful of challenges out there still in that top degrader list that, again, I think focusing as an enterprise helps us find ways to accelerate that. There's also sort of an underlying, I'll say, the infrastructure you spoke about, some of the challenges we've had in the depot stand-up space, and I think that has been a little bit about focus and ensuring that the resources are put in place year after year to stand that capability up. Another piece of what drives that is improving the forecasting and understanding. So focus on the top degraders, but then ensuring that, and one of the things we've done is put a lot of energy in modeling and understanding, forecasting, predicting the demand signal so that we get it right. A lot of these materials take lead time to procure, even when you do have funding and even when you have repair capacity. And really, repair capacity is the focus because it's the fastest, cheapest way to get material to the places that it's needed versus, I think, a focus we had on initial spares and ensuring we spared enough. It's not the most affordable way. And so, yes, we got to get readiness up, but we've got to maintain affordability at the same time. So a couple of things I think we've been focused on bringing the right capabilities and tools to help us think through that as we go forward in the future.
Are there, to that point, are there efforts that are being made to get after what that sustainment and logistics would look like in a contested environment, particularly as we look at the events that are unfolding in Europe at this time, but worldwide? I mean, I've always thought to myself that the F-35 with, number of partners, 7 partners and 9 FMS customers, and that number growing. When you're a combatant commander, or if you're a commander in the field trying to deal with all the coalition partners that you may have, which coalition partner gets that most important part first can be very difficult, one, decision to make, but 2, ensuring that those contested logistics are still there.
So that's a great question, Hi-Fi. So there are opportunities and there are challenges. In fact, I appreciate the warfighting community, in fact, is doing tabletop exercises right now and through the year of running through various scenarios. There's a huge opportunity, for instance, in Europe to, in a few years, we're going to be flying between 500 and 600 F-35s in Europe, and less than 100 of those are going to be U.S. What a huge opportunity that is to leverage each other's logistics and maintenance environments. And at the same time, how do we properly supply the material, the parts in the right place to make all that happen? In my mind, and this program was set up to be very efficient, just in time kind of a supply chain. I'm not sure that works always in a contested environment. And when you take a just-in-time mentality, which I think is kind of a business model in the commercial industry that works very well in terms of keeping costs down and those kind of things, it introduces a lot of risk in operationally when you have that mentality. You get a hiccup in the supply chain, whether it be a strike or a top degrader or something like that, or a quality issue, and that becomes your single point of failure. That's exactly what we need to look at. What does right look like into the future to give us some more resiliency in a combat environment?
And we're seeing that supply chain rise to the challenge in Australia. We just talked with the General before about we flew back from the International Air Show in Avalon just only a few weeks ago, and the vast distances you've got to go to be able to supply JSFs in Australia. We've got 3 squadrons approaching final operational capability down in Australia, and it's a significant challenge to get the resources down there. I mean, it's about the size of a US fighter wing or a US carrier wing that we're operating down there, and we're really seeing the global sustainment rising to the challenge. I think the vast distances in Australia by its very nature is difficult to operate down there, and we're working more on operating in a contested environment. But it's a great example of the global nature, I think, of the JSF and that it's working.
You know, one of the things I would offer, as you described, General Schmidt, I mean, the fleet, 1,000 aircraft today, growing rapidly, and the learnings from tabletop exercises, from real-life exercises, and even just the logistics of standard training, et cetera. It's a very complex system. The threat, as it's evolving, is certainly telling us that our traditional methods are not going to be tolerated. We have been trying to think of it as we listen to the warfighter, their thinking, their experience, more of a system of systems, and how do we make sure that all of the pieces, because you can have a healthy supply if you can't communicate about where that supply needs to get by when, et cetera, even not just the last tactical mile, but the full machine. So really trying to think about it in a system of system and what are those components. So for us, you know, ensuring resilient lift, ensuring edge technologies. Out at the forward edge of battle, can we communicate resiliently? How do we think about some of the work we're doing in the Alice Odin, I'll say Odin, we're transitioning, and I think seeing some real positive outcomes from that. How do we think about not carrying so much data around with us everywhere? How do we re-architect, and the team has done this, re-architected the system to try to minimize what you've got to take with you and communicate along the way. So, you know, when you think about the supply chain, certainly having the demand signal correct, and that correct is about where are you going to need to have things that you're going to have more challenges getting it there because of the environment. So there's a lot of components, I think, as we listen and absorb how you all think about it in the services, you know, that system of systems approach and, you know, the partnerships between us, the networked communications, ensuring the supply chain resiliency both for supplying and repairing, movement of parts, et cetera. Really trying to think about how do we lift all those boats at once. We won't solve it with one piece of this getting corrected, but rather the entire system working together and a partnership between industry and services to do that.
Thank you. So probably no other service has had the opportunity to see what it's like to be out there with a coalition partner up close and personal, like the Marine Corps did on Her Majesty's ship, Queen Elizabeth. Are there logistics or sustainment things that you noted that were out there from an unclassified side of the house that you could share from that CSG-21 deployment?
Sure, no, thank you, sir. I would center my comments along three main avenues. I think from the ops side of the house, what we learned out of that deployment that we can talk about in here is the interoperability issues that we're going to have to work through. I think CSG-21 deployment gave us great insight as that ship literally steamed around the world. It went to every major combatant command and employed live flight ops, interchangeable flight ops that were really, really telling for us as we develop our fully informed operating concepts. I think along the logistics line, the second part of this, and I would tack into this previous conversation and say, you know, there's obviously a lot of work being done on contested logistics in the Department of Defense amongst all of our respective services. Marine Corps recently released Contested Logistics Doctrinal Pub along those lines, but I have a cautionary note and a optimistic note all wrapped up into one, sir. And that is, I think the F-35, particularly the B model, when incorporated into the Marine Corps' fully informed operating concept, gives us some unique opportunities that we've never seen before or even really thought out well before. Let me give you a quick example. You know, as we do expeditionary advance-based operations in whatever theater, it doesn't have to be confined to the Pacific, we can do that anywhere. We have the ability to, with this platform, I'll just go to L-class ships, right? We have the ability to change out the ACE, which traditionally has been, it was 6 Aviate-Bs, now it's 10 F-35Bs, so we have an increase in 66% firepower that's forward deployed and globally engaged. But we have an opportunity, if we think a little differently, if we don't have the shackles of old constructs in our mind, to change out the composition of the air combat element aboard our L-class ships at any moment. What do I mean by that? I'll give you two quick examples. Number one, Say we take the 31st MEU in the Far East, and God forbid there's a natural disaster that goes down. We can, the Marine Corps in our aviation combat element with MV-22s, we can, in one deck cycle, change the composition of the ace. We can fly the F-35s off, and we can fly in, you pick the number, say 6 to 8 more MV-22s to do humanitarian assistance, disaster relief, and we can do that in one deck cycle. Take the opposite of that. Say there's saber rattling, or we need to make a lightning carrier, which all of you are familiar with. In one deck cycle, we can fly off the MV-22s, and we can fly on 10 more, 12 more, you pick the number, F-35Bs, and we change the composition of the ace in one deck cycle. Now that brings with it new challenges for AvCal that's aboard the ship to support that, but that's also where I think we have an opportunity to change our thinking and our operating concepts of, I'll close with, we were having a discussion inside the group, wicked smart people, much smarter than I, and we were talking about how would you work through maintenance in an EAB environment, Expeditionary Advanced Base environment. And we started our thinking, and this goes towards we need to unshackle ourselves from old constructs. We started our thinking by how are we going to do the inspections that we do in the field? We're not. We're in combat. So we mitigate risk all the time. We have great procedures, and the Marines, all the maintainers across all the services are incredibly awesome at doing that. But the shackles come off when we go to war. So as we think about this airplane and contested logistics, which is important for us to do, we need to do it without the shackles of our old constructs, because this is a revolutionary platform, gives us new opportunities. It's a problem we have to solve and continuously work on, but I'm excited at the opportunities that exist out there. Closing on CSG 21, that also gave us insight into how to close the loop on C2. So when you start working off each other's ships, you are making the assumption that you're working under the same national command authorities that are given down to the warfighters. That may not necessarily be the case. You know, in NATO, NATO countries may choose to enter a fray if there is one on different timelines. But we, as operators, need to make sure that we are fully committed to understanding the C2 construct when we go out on deployment. I think CSG 21 did a lot of advancement of that, courtesy of with the help of a lot who are sitting in this room on there. So I'm excited at that. We continue to learn those lessons. There's a whole bevy of them that are on the classified side that we're going to take advantage of, sir.
Excellent. Thank you, General. Appreciate it. Any logistics questions from the crowd before we shift and talk a little bit more about test and weapons? Excellent. Oh, go ahead, sir.
How do you communicate that demand signal to the massive amount of suppliers you have to go to direct charge? So you talked about, getting the right demand signal. Then the next challenge is filtering that down through tier 3 and 4 suppliers.
General?
So the demand signal is generated by models that we continually update. I would say we, specific to the models themselves, we have relied on the reliability predictions, in engineering at the beginning of the program. It's very important now because not all those predictions, some were better, some we were more reliable or less reliable. We are now updating all of that with real life data of what we're seeing out there. That demand signal flows into our predictions of those parts that we will need, and flows through whether it's Lockheed or Pratt down through their supply chain. And Bridget,
Sure.
anything to add to that?
Sure, I would just offer that, as you said, General, so there's been a maturation of the modeling, and think of really the way the supply comes to bear is in kind of three elements, really. The demand signal of initial spares. So, as you said, the reliability of the airplane now with, nearly 650,000 flight hours, we have a lot of good insight. More than 90% of the parts have met or exceeded their reliability predictions. So I think we're finding that in general, the airplane is highly reliable. But frankly, it takes one part to down emissions. So you have to think about it that way. Those reliability numbers, as they continue to mature and are modeled for the demand signal, there is a lay-in of initial spares, and then there is a sizing of the repair capacity. We've been, I think, together very successful at, and still work to go, and it takes time for these things to manifest through the supply chain, but have been successful in a couple of performance-based logistics contracts with suppliers so that they are accountable for the demand signal. They determine the size of their footprint in the factories to do repair, to lay in material. They have an accountability for determining what is the lay in of material. So that would be one side. And then working closely with the depots to stand up that repair capability. And it's not just procedures, tech data, equipment, it's also lay in material. So that, I think, is the maturity of that through the Hybrid Product Support Integrator or the Lightning Support Center partnership is establishing those demand signals. And then we, on a I'll say a regular basis right now, annually, work that with the supply base in terms of forward-looking. We are transitioning at the end of this year. It's our work together with the Joint Program Office to transition to a supply performance-based logistics contract where, as opposed to a transactional supply experience, we would have a performance base. So on a larger scale, we would be establishing lay-in material requirements. Industry would be investing in, because of a 5-year period, what reliability challenges out there in that 10% of the parts and top degraders, et cetera, that industry could invest in design change for that, different ways to expedite bringing higher reliable parts, lower cost parts to the fight. And the transactional nature just takes time and a lot of contract works. The performance takes that time out of the machine. Dispositioning parts, is it better to repair a part or to introduce a new part into the system to satisfy a demand? Those things will, the theory and the concept is that'll move a lot faster than having to do it transactionally. So we're excited to get started in that space, and that's not just a Pratt & Whitney LM, that would be the supply, the entire industry participating in those pieces. So the expectation is that it improves performance with speed and it reduces cost.
Yeah, I would only add one thing to that, and Bridget kind of alluded to it earlier. Not all parts are created equal. So if you get it wrong on a part that you can recover in a few weeks and go buy more of, that's completely different than one that has a 2 or 3 year lead time. So it's very important for us to look at those long lead time items with a lot of scrutiny and maybe make some different decisions about how well we want to invest there to make sure that we don't get into a situation of having a power module. You can't do anything without one. Like we were in before, and making sure we don't get into those situations.
I'd offer just one more. Sorry about that. Never enter a mature engagement, right? Isn't that a training rule? Yeah, from a tactical and an operational perspective, I would also offer the Naval Aviation Enterprise has undergone kind of ops centers, their own ops centers, which has greatly increased the availability and readiness across all the Navy and Marine Corps TMSs, so type model series aircraft that are out there. It's still, I would say it's just past its nascent stage, but those operations allow us to manage that part down for the last tactical mile to the best place where it's going to have the most operational impact. So I'm excited at what that will bring us, not only for peacetime results, but if we do have to go to war, then those results that we'll be able to produce for readiness, availability, and getting those parts the last tactical mile will all come through the NAE and the MOC on the Don side.
There's one more question over here on logistics, and I'm going to shift.
Well, that's a great question coming from one of my own guys, so that's good. So as I hope you know, we're trying to get all over. I agree with everything you said, by the way, every part of it. We have so many. I have 2 prime contractors, and we have a contract mod every single day of the year. That makes no sense to me. So we are trying to consolidate contracts. When I look at something and take it through the development process from beginning to end, whatever that new capability is, in some cases it touches 30 contracts going through the process. That makes no sense. So we are together trying to consolidate contracts. On the how long this takes stuff, and there's a whole bunch into that. I say over and over, it is no engineer's dream or contracting officer, but for sure an engineer's dream to come and work on the coolest program in the Department of Defense and spend literally half your time working on a proposal or a request for proposal. And so we're trying to change that. We are trying to get more agile. We're trying to combine contracts. And then on the funding side, that's a great question, and maybe not one for public discussion, because I have different discussions, whether it's the Navy, the Marine Corps, the Air Force, or our international partners. But at the end game, how we have this broad enterprise, a lot of great partners, foreign military sales customers, 3 separate services, but at the same time, they all have their own process by which how they fund the level of scrutiny of every piece of it. It is not all the same, and so those are things individually that I am definitely trying to get after and put if the people in the services want to do something differently, then come on over and join in the JPO. We are not a separate service. I am literally the only human being in the JPO that works for OSD or works for, that is a joint person. So either you're an Air Force, Navy, or Marine Corps, military, or government civilian. And so, we need to figure out what right looks like in aligning one process that everyone can align to. It's a great question and a huge focus area for me and my deputy, great deputy Sean Burke, and hers, Doug Wilheim. That is literally their top priority every single day.
General Schmidt, if I could, the only thing, or a couple things I might add to that is, I think one of the things we are doing better at with a conscious focus from Mr. Burke and Sean Burke and Doug Wilhelm is, let's get aligned before we start passing contract paperwork back and forth. So I think we have had a historical experience together of laying out a set of requirements, passing them over, and then making adjustments back and forth versus can we align first and then capture that in documentation, send it once, let's go propose once, let's go negotiate once. And I think that's a lot of the success they're having right now is pulling together the right group and actually just communicate, make sure we've got this right before we get started. I think that will have a tremendous impact. To your point, as opposed to breaking things up, there used to be a term chunkatize that I think we're not ever supposed to say, so it's embargoed in here. You can't say chunkatized outside of here, but trying to take a longer view on planning and making sure that we have an acquisition strategy that starts from the beginning of the requirements all the way through how we're going to develop, produce, sustain it, and do that planning early so that the budgeting forecast can be done well. And then our job is to perform to that so we don't create a problem in the budget because we've had a challenge. We, industry, have had a challenge. So I think everybody has their piece of this to help contribute to getting to a more stable, more efficient, more effective, and prevent us from having so much contract backlog. It can't be the excuse for not having warfighter capability at the point of need.
Okay, thank you. Let's shift gears and talk a little bit about test and weapons integration. Are there opportunities that you see to modernize test plans to more rapidly integrate clearances, maybe an interim clearance and then full clearances? What can we be doing faster through digital integration, the JSC partner or FMS resources, to get after this 5th generation integration side of the house? So, Air Commodore Port, you get some thoughts on this.
It's a great question. I think Australia has a lot to offer in that space. We have ranges down in Australia that can be used. We've got anywhere refueling aircraft that can be used. And by the very nature of we've got less export restrictions on us from US to Australia. So there's opportunities there to speed up the testing and the integration of these weapons. Particularly, I think Australia as well, by the very nature of the way we operate, is inherently joint too. And we have, the F35 is a US Air Force aircraft that's operated by the Australian Air Force. We also operate the F-18s and the Growlers are operated by people wearing the same uniform as me. And then we operate the E-7 Wedgetail as well by people operating the same uniform. So we are very driven to be integrated. We're very driven to have improved weapons availability on these aircraft, and we also have capacity that we can offer the US. So we have offered that capacity, and we stand willing and ready to do as much as we can.
General Schmidt, anything you'd like to add?
It's a great question and a huge focus area for me as well, and Bridget and all of our team. So when I look at what are some of the limiting factors to weapons integration, to all of the Block 4 capabilities, we quickly run into things like a limited number of flight sciences airplanes, and they're really old. And we're recapitalizing them, but we kind of wait a little too long to do that. But we are recapitalizing at least some of them. There's some really innovative ideas out there. We just went on contract with Lockheed for what we're calling flight sciences light pods. So not a full-up orange wire jet, but something kind of in the middle there. You had some great things that you mentioned that I am challenging the team. Why can't I fly it on this airplane and take advantage of the fact that I flew it on that airplane, an A or B or C, and ask the engineering community to take advantage of what we learned here and bring it across to all the airplanes? Why do I need to have a flight sciences airplane to do this testing or that testing? And we're looking at that across the board. What risks, and there's a huge difference between a risk that is potential loss of an aircraft or a human life, and a risk that is, what if I flew this heavy weapons on this airplane that's not designed for it? Is that a 5% degradation in life for the airplane? I think I'm willing to take that risk to integrate that weapon sooner if it was a 5% degradation on that particular airplane. But those are the kinds of questions that we need to continue to ask and challenge people who are working through weapons integration with us. Our lab infrastructure as well. We need to make sure we're investing in that. We're very much looking at with our partners who have offered to help in this area with what capacity help that they can provide us. Also, model-based systems engineering. All of our Block 4 capabilities from now on will be based in model-based systems engineering, those that are just getting started now. We have a few pilots in the past where we've shown to ourselves that can be a game changer. I don't think we're taking enough, challenging ourselves enough to take advantage of modeling and simulation. I will tell you, I think we're, in the joint simulation environment, which maybe we'll talk about later, how can we take advantage of all we're learning there? That was designed to get us through operational test, but we're seeing huge advantage of it in training. How do I take the great stuff that's been done in the joint simulation environment and transition that over to the development phase in the program? So anyways, we're really trying to explore all of those things to knock down barriers, think of different ways to do weapons and capabilities integration onto the airplane.
Bridget?
Sure, I would just add a couple things. Even before the test out in the field side, the flight test piece of this, we have been introducing a lot of models in the development side, and I think it's helping the enterprise gain confidence in the effectiveness of models and simulation. As we've been challenged with compression on some of the development and integration timelines, whether that's from a supplier's product into the integration labs at Lockheed Martin and then out to flight test, we have taken advantage of a lot of those models, a lot of automation, and other tools in that early cycle that I think is is developing some confidence that it can be an effective approach. It's a little different, I think, people, when we start talking about trading out flight test. We have historically had this is how you run a program, this is how you flight test, and we really have to break that mindset. I think as you've been leading, General Schmidt. And so maybe a buildup of that gives us greater confidence in doing such. We are also doing things like continuing to evolve and develop the software, even if we're waiting on certification, or we know we will be waiting on certification. How do we get weapons integrated, the software integrated and resident in the product that goes to the airplane but not yet unlocked because it hasn't been certified? That at least helps us not need, once certification is complete, to come back and then cycle it through software. So it is resident right now. We're doing a lot of weapons work for the weapons you're interested in the later lots now, and we'll have that resident as we go through and then unlock it as it gets certified, which is, again, just sort of, it doesn't solve the let's do more with models, but it prepares us at the time that we get, I think, to a level of maturity and can go through certification faster. We're also doing things looking at families of weapons and what certification might we have done on a platform with the mission systems, for example. So the mission systems are consistent in the A, B, C versions largely. So why, if I've certified a weapon in an A from a mission systems perspective, why can I not take credit for that in a B and C, or vice versa? I've done it in a C, I can take credit for it in an A and B, because it's really about the capacity and throughput through the test machine, both integration and test, but also the flight test. That's where the pipe, as you say, is constricted and constrained. So we are looking at and working through a lot of those kinds of options to be ready to expand that at the time we get into test and certification.
Let's talk a little bit, we'll shift again because we've got about 17 minutes left. If you could talk a little bit about the efforts that are underway to address higher fidelity SIMs, what's being done to link those SIMs across services and partners, and either in the US or around the globe, and then kind of touching on the F-35's inherent interoperability. What other training opportunities can we pursue with our partners, both inside and outside the F-35 family? If we're looking at the future of global joint aviation platforms, how do we get after that training aspect?
What do you want?
I'll start with you.
Okay. So certainly we have I think these guys will have a lot to add to it. So just our simulators in general, one size doesn't fit all. We have some great simulator capability out there. There's a huge demand signal for more deployable simulators to allow people to train continuously while out in the fleet and to connect those simulators as well. I would also, I started out, and some of this will give me a chance to finish talking about the joint simulation environment that I'm very, very proud of the work that NavAir is doing in conjunction with Afotech and with support from the DOT&E and our teams and Lockheed, building this joint simulation environment that is the best threat and representative environment anywhere out there. And you can't recreate that in real life anywhere. And it is really spectacular, the progress they've made over the last couple of years. Now they've been doing that in support of getting to milestone C full rate production that I've asked to happen at the end of this year, which would require us to do a run for score in this joint simulation environment in August. Why that is very important is because I want to get past that part in the program and allow us to work with NavAir and Lockheed to bring up the joint simulation environment to the current version of software in the jet, because we're held to that standard until we get through IoT&E with the joint simulation environment. And that environment, by the way, happens to be the best training environment out there. And the weapons schools, any squadron wanting to deploy wants to get in there before they deploy. It is absolutely incredible. I'm sure General Cederholm could do a much better job than me of talking to that environment, but just some initial thoughts there.
Thanks, General Schmidt. And I would add that I agree wholeheartedly with everything that General Schmidt said. If you think about this from a tactical, operational, and training perspective, realize that as we progress in the acquisition of certain capabilities in the future, and we get towards our fully informed operating concept, right, where we bring all of our assets together, I heard it one time referred to as when we turn America on in a conflict, that should not be the first time that we have trained together with all of those assets. So our UAS assets, space-based, whatever that may be, all of our assets, we need to have a training environment, an LVC construct that allows us to gather all those exquisite assets and capabilities that we're going to use under duress and train to them in a training environment. We can't pull them together like our old model and bring them to red flag or bring them to any other exercises. So what General Schmidt talked about, the importance of the JSE in that for the Marine Corps, is you're exactly right. We're bringing our weapons schools to train there, so graduate level tactics. We're also bringing our fleet aviators to train there because of how representative of the threat that it really is. It's magic. I'm encouraged at that training venue. The LVC construct is important to the Marine Corps and all the services. I think I can speak for all of them on that as we go forward. So we can train, learn, and employ all of the assets that we will on day one when we turn America on.
Bridget?
Sure, I would just add, I think there's been incredible progress and outcome made in the joint simulation environment. And I think we've continued to hear the rave reviews of the fidelity of the sim. It really is the high-end fight simulation tool. And I think as you think about training, it still remains sort of a spectrum of training from that which, teaching someone the basics of flying the F-35 is different than being in the high-end fight. So working together to continue to figure out, how do we have, at varying levels of training, deployable on ships, deployable out to bases where you can have a smaller footprint, maybe not necessarily connected at the time, but is there and available for the refresh of the pilots out in the field. So there's a whole range, I think, of training that's there, connecting it and figuring out how to do more, how to connect the different bases and ships to enable that while you are at the same time having, as you all said, a huge demand signal for pilots to go through the JSC for that high end. As we continue to evolve capabilities and don't rely on open air testing as much, having a location where there is a high fidelity representation of the threat and the weapon system and the interactions, and then connecting, to your point, sir, was connecting all of those high-end assets together and training in that environment. So I think it is a range, and we continue to support with some of the other elements of the range of training.
And I think, Hi-Fi, you mentioned deployable trainers as well. That's another lesson we learned from CSG 21 aboard the Queen Elizabeth. When you talk to the pilots that went there, we had some deployable trainers on there. When you get into blue water ops, and you know better than most, those skills, which are quick to atrophy, you can hop in the box, take a few runs, and then launch off the front of either the carrier, L-class ship, go work off of EABs, and have the latest and greatest training that is constructed and tied in and interoperable. They were invaluable on that. We've learned a lot of lessons from that. We're planning to integrate those as we go forward as well.
Excellent, thanks. Air Commodore Porter, from a
I think we're
partner
finding,
standpoint.
from an Australian perspective, we can get our pilots, our crews to a very good standard using the simulators that we have, 6 on the East Coast and 4 on the North, but it's getting that extra mile out of them. That high intensity training is where we're having to diversify. So still coming across to red flag exercises, etc. Still form part of our training model. I think it's no dissimilar to trying to connect your PlayStation from Australia to the US. It's one thing to do that, but it's another thing to connect to F-35 or multiple F-35 simulators across that vast distance. We just don't have the bandwidth at the moment, so we need to diversify our training to be able to achieve the standards that we have.
Excellent, thanks. So I've got a trick question for you before I go to the audience. The F-35 has been out there for a while, and I didn't pre-plan this one, so you're gonna have to think rapidly on your feet or on your seat. What has surprised you the most as the F-35's been out there and deployed and actually operating? We know it's a great aircraft, we know it can do phenomenal things, but what one thing did you say, holy smokes, I didn't know it would do X, Y, or Z, clearly at an unclassed level, but that caught you by surprise and you were very impressed with what it could do? I'll start with you, General.
Thanks. Get together afterwards. I'd say the thing that has surprised me most about this airplane is we always knew it was an information collector. We always knew the fusion, that was advertised with it long ago. But I'm still amazed at how much we're learning, both in what that machine vacuums up on the battlefield and how we can distribute it to the trigger pullers to make various decisions. So that is encouraging to me, but that's what surprised me the most. The amount of information that this machine takes in, if we can parse it, offboard it, get it to the right people, we can change the way that we operate. We can close kill chains. We can close ISR chains a lot faster than we ever thought we could. That's the one thing.
Thanks. General Schmidt?
This won't sound as cool as General Cedarholm, but what surprised me is, so I was never in this program office, but I was around it both in OSD and on the Air Force side, a couple of jobs I've had in my career, and they said things like, oh, we'll never be able to maintain the signatures and all that stuff, and the maintenance on the ship and everything, and these airplanes, I just talked to the wing commander, the Navy wing commander. It's pretty cool to be the wing commander. When those airplanes came back from deployment, they were in better condition when they left. That says a lot about the wing, but it also says a lot about the airplane and the ability to take care of this airplane. While that might not sound, it is absolutely incredible to see this airplane operating around the world. One more thing kind of along those lines. We had this mindset that it was going to be, like I said, just in time and all those kind of things. It doesn't surprise me, but we are finally doing it. I don't think we did it before, was really listening to the maintainers, giving them the opportunity to provide feedback to us and us deliver, for instance, expanded limits on engines and those things to the field. We will solve any of our maintenance challenges. I strongly believe that. If we try to go back to the original intent of every part of how we were going to do maintenance and all that stuff, I think that's where we will fail. When we listen to our maintainers and then do what they're asking for us to do, we are changing the game here every time we deliver one of those things back out there.
Thanks. Air Commodore Porter?
I think I would echo what General Cedarholm talked about. What surprised me is the ability of this aircraft to hoover up the amounts of information that it does is simply phenomenal. And I'll repeat some comments, funnily, that came from Buster Beale at the JPO there. So when we were talking about this panel, I asked him that exact question, and Buster's an F-35 pilot who also did an F-22 exchange up in Alaska. And he said, the JSF is an outstanding capability, particularly when you stretch it out amongst all of the partners. But things like the F-35 and the E-7, their ability to work together are absolutely phenomenal. And from what I've seen in the last 2, 3, 4 years, those capabilities and what we're working out we can do with them, and seeing the young men and women, the aviators, particularly down the back of the E-7, it has blown my mind what they're able to do in concert with aircraft like the F-22, the F-35, and then also across, as I talked about before, traditional US Navy capabilities that the Australian Air Force flies, the F-18 and the Growler, those working in concert as true joint capabilities in a coalition fight. I really think it gives us the capability edge in the region.
Thank you. Bridget?
Yeah, and maybe a little bit from the outside in, possibly not qualified to make this statement, but I think for me the most surprising thing is to actually see the transformation of relationships between the nations and services. There's been a lot of relationships with previously sharing common equipment, flying the same equipment from different country to country. But the fact that the nations are interoperating and they're sharing data, it's happening automatically on the airplane. And then it has created, I think, a relationship different than before, where they're actually talking through the same mission, the same outcomes operationally. And it just feels like, my observation is that it feels like the nations have come together closer by having not just the same equipment, but actually operating it together. And in fact, driving the bounds of, hey, there's got to be more that we could be sharing. I think the F-35 has really shined a light on the possibilities and really have driven people's objectives and aspirations to be much greater than they would have been, service to service, just because it has pulled those communities together around a common, not just a common platform, but a common mission outcome. And it's been amazing to watch. And as just a citizen and a patriot, I'm super grateful. Lots of stuff going on in the world that demands that.
Great, thank you. We probably got time for one question. All the way in the back, I saw that hand first. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. God bless you. General, want to take a shot at this? I'm looking at you.
General?
Oh, yeah, General Cedarholm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sir, just to understand your question, are you asking me to give you the outcome of if we happen to go to war with China, Russia, or Iran? Sure. I'd say I'd hearken back to Admiral Paparo's 60 Minutes interview, where I think it was Miss O'Donnell asked him if he was hoping he was ready to go to war with China, and without missing a beat, Admiral Paparo, who I just sat with last week, said, it's not my hope, it's our duty. So the short answer to your question is, I can't predict when we will go to war. All I know is that, and I can speak for the Marine Corps and the other services, is that we're prepared to go time now. We have a mandate and a mission set from Congress to do that, to be the nation's 911 force in readiness. We're out there doing it every day. The Marines, the maintainers, the pilots, they are ready to go. As far as weapons go, I couldn't have more confidence in the men and women who fly our airplanes, who fly all of our airplanes, that make the whole system work, with regards to when it comes to, if deterrence fails, to putting warheads on foreheads, to use an old cliche. I have no doubt that we will do that in there. If you're asking me, do I want more weapons? You're talking to a strike fighter pilot. I always want more gas and I want more weapons. So, just like the old venerable workhorse A6, I will take everything. General Schmidt's been very transparent in working for that. The services are united in their goals. If you look at, we just had the opportunity to sit in front of the TALF, the House TALF Committee, and we have been very transparent. We are budgeting for more weapons. The timelines for integration, we're looking to pull left to be prepared as soon as we can go. So that's the best answer that I can give you. I have my personal opinions on when things may kick off, but they have no business being put out here. All I'm telling you, sir, is that the men and women who make up all of our armed forces, we're ready to go right now.
Great answer. Thanks, General. I appreciate that. I think with 30 seconds left, we're going to go ahead and be smart and close with that. Except I'm going to say thanks to Julia Simpson and the Navy League for putting the panel together, for bringing together 4 absolutely phenomenal panelists. It's been a pleasure to be up here on the stage with you, and I look forward to watching what the future of the F-35 has to bring to us globally. Thank you very much.
Well done. Well done.